Riot just released the patch notes for 7.04 with sweeping nerfs to half of the agent pool, but I think that's a mistake. Their goal was to increase game clarity by reducing large AoE ults, probably stemming from the Twitter memes.
Okay, there's the Cove, actually has the setup this time, something is dropping down, orbital strike up over the top.
But I think these changes are bad for the game, especially in ranked, because having fewer ults per game will make the game more snowbally, where a team that's getting stomped will probably get one ult the whole game, and this disincentivizes using ults in creative or innovative ways because you'll want to get value out of your one ult this half. So let's go through each nerf, and I'm going to suggest how I would have changed the agent. Starting with Breach, Riot reduced his Aftershock from 3 to 2 ticks, but increased the damage to 80. I actually think this is a good change because it's a slight buff. It does enough damage to take out an enemy with full health and shields, and it'll do that damage faster now. It just reduces some of Breach's delay, which I think they didn't intend for when he was overhauled. They increased his ult points from 8 to 9, and it's already memed as a visual effect. I don't see why it needs a nerf. Similarly, Brim got his ult increased from 7 to 8 points. I think this is because Brim was starting to get flexed in multi-controller comps, which was insanely oppressive with how much delay he has. With the other controllers, the nerfs have made it more valuable to bait out their util by increasing recharge times, which I think is good for the game. It encourages tactics and strategy. At first, I thought you can't do this with Brim, because 2 smokes just isn't enough. But the more I think about it, it makes perfect sense. Give him just 2 smokes, but make them 25 seconds each. It would be super valuable to bait out an attack in a lane that you're not going to push, but a well-placed smoke will have insane impact. And when Brim is on attack, it's so annoying when he takes sight and has a leftover smoke that can keep a choke blocked for the entire retake. I'd love to hear your thoughts on a 2-smoke Brim in the comments. Moving on to Fade, she got a slight nerf that the time to re-equip your gun takes slightly longer after using your ability. I think this is fine and actually raises the skill ceiling a bit by encouraging you to stop directing the Prowler as soon as you can.
Bring them down.
GEKKO got some slight tweaks where his mosh pit does 10 damage per second before exploding, which I think will punish some duelists who try to get a pick and then get out. His wingman got his HP reduced by 20, and Thrash just has a little bit of a explosion. I would guess this is going to look similar to Ray's ult to make it clear where the ult takes effect. Overall, a good change in my opinion. And moving on to KJ, she also got her ult points increased from 8 to 9. And I think this is a bad change again. Imagine how frustrating it's going to be to have your KJ ult get destroyed by a Ray's nade. Riot's argument is that it places too much pressure on the enemy, but isn't that the whole point of abilities in an FPS? I think ults raise the skill ceiling because the best teams will have planned around them. Just look at this retake from Champs where EGE retake what looks to be an impossible 4v4 with a KJ ult under and a Brim ult to delay. They know Brim ulting tower will bait out the KJ ult, but they're ready with Ethan to force the KJ back with his Aftershock and then break the ult. After that, they just bait out the Brim ult with a tap, and then they have full info on the remaining players, and the spike isn't planted for them.
They do have this orbital strike, but this could turn into a very costly round if they have to commit all of that to try to win this one out. Lockdown's actually destroyed. Ethan swinging the corner, finds one, makes his presence known. Now the orbital has to come in, but it's a bit too early. Mako now finds himself in a 1v4, and he can't get...
Moving on to Omen. His paranoia got a slight, I wouldn't even say nerf. Previously, with Omen, you could run forward while throwing your Q to make it go a little faster, or run backwards to make it go a little bit slower. And now that's not a thing, and I just don't get this one. I think it just lowers the skill cap from a pretty straightforward agent. When have you been in-game and thought, wow, that Omen flash was traveling a little bit too slowly? Next is Skye. She got a few nerfs, including her flash was reduced from 2.5 to 2 seconds, her Q had its HP reduced to 80, and the Seekers both got 1 extra ult point and had their health reduced by 30. I think the flash cast duration is actually larger than you'd expect. The info is huge, and lots of teams would solo a site with Skye, playing super passive and just have her check for info every 30 seconds. This change forces her to be a bit more committed to the site to check for the deep info that her teammates can rotate off of. I think this is actually a really good change. Moving on to Sova, he had a slight nerf where his recon bolt had its total number of scans reduced from 3 to 2. I think this is a good change. I mean, it really doesn't do anything in the high level play, right? How often does a dart get all 3 scans off and you get a pick or some info with the 3rd scan that you didn't get with the first 2? But this change I think is more targeted at casual players by reducing the delay impact of a scan, or the impact of a scan that doesn't get broken quickly or covered by a Jett smoke. Next, moving on to Viper, she again got her ult points increased from 8 to 9. Compared to other agents that got their ult nerfed, Viper's nerf feels a little bit better because her kit is so much less concentrated in the ult. Next, Astra had a bunch of tweaks. The Gravity Well had its startup time increased from 0.6 to 1.25. The Gravity Time duration was decreased from 2.75 to 2. The Nova Pulse had its startup time decreased from 1.25 to 1. And now her ult completely blocks audio. Firstly, these nerfs to the pull just make no sense to me. Astra seemed like she was at the perfect spot balance-wise. There's no map that she was necessary on, but also she could be flexed on tons of maps. Why does her kit need to be balanced? I think it's okay for her suck to be stronger than the stun. Also, I think the ult change is a good one. It never made sense to me that it blocked noise, except for when someone was close and it didn't. And when you're in-game, you kind of have no way of knowing. Next are the Jett changes. She really got an essay of changes. I'm not going to read them all out because I'm sure you're already aware of lots of these changes, but in my opinion, they're huge for the meta given that she was at an over 50% pick rate, and in the context that no other duelist got a nerf, especially Raze, who is also at a similar pick rate. It just seems a little bit strange how hard they're targeting Jett. And then lastly, I wanted to finish off with one agent that wasn't changed, but I think should have been. And that's Deadlock. Given that we didn't see a single Deadlock in all of Champs, I would have loved to see a buff to her nade. I think it should force players to walk to one of the edges to remove the net. Right now, it's just weak as an ability because it's so hard to land and then so quick to take off. And if you also want to see some more Deadlock gameplay, I recommend you take a look at this video, which is why I think Deadlock is actually viable in Ranked.